It's so nice to kind of meet you face to face.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on today.
Yeah, I feel like I know you a bit just because I've seen your commentary on Twitter, which is always so
Yes,
meaningful. I feel like
thank you.
we have tons of mutual friends, and I feel like your voice has been just so important in the dialogue around guns and violence and all that kind of stuff. And I was so thrilled to read your book. The title, When Thoughts and Prayers Aren't Enough, I just feel like the title alone even says it all. But it was just such an incredible account. And one of the things I really loved about it was the way that you set up your personal story, and you talked in the middle of the book about this number fatigue, where
Mm,
people get kind of, I guess we get a little bit, fatigued, compassion
yeah,
fatigue, number fatigue to hearing numbers. And your book really set this up as this is a story. Like I am
yeah,
a person, and you spend the first part of the book talking about how this affected your own life. And I really
yeah.
appreciated that so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
Um,
I think we're not built to comprehend such large numbers of
yeah.
things, especially large numbers of terrible things that's like really hard for us to think about.
Hmm.
And so we hear numbers and it just feels nearly impossible to like really understand that each of those numbers is a person with a
Yeah.
family, which is
Yeah.
more numbers and more numbers. And it's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And you did such a beautiful job of telling your story. You were a shooting survivor at a community college. And you talk, so much too about just the fact that I think people might, hear that story and think like everybody survived. So, you know, thumbs up. That was a good one. And you really detail how it affected your life in really dramatic ways.
Yeah.
Um, you sustained a pretty life altering injury to your hand, and this happened. I think was it 6 weeks before your wedding?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk about some of the ripple effects of being a shooting survivor beyond just like, okay, I survived, but like this did have a profound effect on your entire life, mentally, physically, all of it.
Yeah. So I spent about a year after having surgeries and going to physical therapy and occupational therapy and counseling for all the sort of emotional and mental things that come with surviving something like a shooting.
Mhm.
So that year of my life was, we'd gotten married and all our friends were getting married, and it was like a very busy year, and there were all these happy things going on.
Mhm.
And at the same time, my life felt like it was so on pause.
Yeah.
Um, I was just dealing with all this stuff that I didn't choose, I didn't ask to be dealing with,
Mhm.
and figuring out what that was going to look like for the rest of my life because I was only 22.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember thinking, like, if this is the rest of my life, like, I hopefully have a long life to live. And if it's going to look like this forever, then that feels impossible.
Yeah.
Um, and so trying to figure out kind of how to move forward. Um, and yeah, I have about 20% use of my hand now. And I have kind of figured out a lot of ways to move through the world and do all the things I have to do. I
Mhm.
have an almost 3-year-old son who makes that difficult because, something's always changing. He's getting bigger, he's getting heavier. Um,
Yeah.
the needs change. And
Uh-huh.
so there are a lot of days it's you know, a constant reminder because
Mhm.
you feel that pain and you remember why you have that pain
Yeah.
and what that means. And so there's a big mental component that comes with the physical pain too. Yeah, and then just kind of things that other people don't have to think about as they move through their day. Do I feel safe going into this grocery store?
Mhm.
What was that loud noise? What's this person doing? Um, knowing I can't sit with my back to the door if we go to a restaurant. Even at church, that's really hard, like sitting with my back facing the door. My son, he goes to his little preschool, and every day I drop him off, and it's like,
Mhm.
okay, like,
Yeah.
making a choice to like put my child in the safety of someone else. And
Yeah.
and that can be really difficult. sending my husband to work every day. He
Hmm.
works at a veterans hospital here. And, you don't know what's going to happen when
Yeah.
the people you love leave your presence.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so there's just a lot of things that I've kind of had to figure out, um, how to live with,
Yeah.
how to deal with them. Yeah.
You spoke in the book about, as a survivor of, PTSD, the fact that, most of us, when we're faced with, a fear or something that, is a possibility or could happen, we think to ourselves like, well, it probably won't. But for you, that was taken away. You did
Yeah.
have the very worst thing, worst possibility happen to you. And then you had to learn how to live with that knowledge of like the worst could happen.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's people, I know so many people, especially living in America, where gun violence is just something that happens here.
Yes.
I know so many people have passing thoughts, if they're going to the movies, going to the mall, a concert, anything like that. And then you're kind of able to put it out of your mind, move on, have fun.
Hmm.
For people like me, it's a little bit harder because
Hmm.
it's so difficult to say, well, that probably won't happen.
Yeah.
It'll probably be fine, because it did happen to
Yeah.
me. And so that worst case scenario feels a little more real, a little more present, in my life. And it can be much harder for me to kind of push that to the back of my mind and really try to enjoy things. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the moments in your book that really got me was you were talking about being on your honeymoon and just you guys had a lot of losses around the honeymoon. You were going to go to Disney. You weren't able to do that physically, but then just you were like, we're going to see a movie. We're going to do something normal. And then you went into, I think it was it Star Trek?
Yeah. Star Trek.
And you were just like, I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, probably in hindsight a poor choice to, go to a
Yes,
movie,
but
especially an IMAX movie, but it was like, we're here, we'll try. And like, all credit to my husband because I was so, afraid of, not being able to do it and needing to leave. And he was like, if you need to leave, that's okay. But like, if you want to try, then that's what we need to do. Like, we should try. And it's like not a big deal if we have to leave. And sure enough, we did have to leave.
yeah.
And it was definitely a bittersweet moment where I realized, that was one of those first things that I tried to do. Um, and the reality kind of hit, oh, like normal things that other people can do that I used to do
Hmm.
are going to be harder for me. And, I can't try to like force myself
Right.
back into these
Yeah.
situations. We have to figure out how, what normal can
Yeah.
look like for us, and
Yeah.
what that means. And, yeah, that was something, yeah, that was hard. That was a hard experience, but thankfully I had a lot of support, still do. And, I was able to kind of try and figure out what things were okay then and what things we'd have to wait on.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
And that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, are you open to reading a little segment of your book for us?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay. Yeah, this is from chapter 7. It's hard to change your mind about something, isn't it? To realize you might be wrong about something you believe for years of your life is a disorienting experience. We find so much of our identity in our belief systems and our opinions. When one of the threads gets pulled, it begins to feel like the whole thing might unravel with it. That's how I felt. I still feel that way sometimes, especially when I'm talking to people I knew when I was younger who remember me a certain way with certain beliefs. I've been asked a few times why I changed everything I believe in. What a casual and very easy breezy question to be asked. The truth is, though, I didn't change everything I believe in. I think I just decided that what I believe in should look a different way. At its core, the issue of gun violence is so much more than an argument over whether or not we should have stricter gun laws. When I think about ending gun violence, I think about children being able to go to school to learn math instead of learning how to hide. I think about babies in their car seats who will live through the drive home without a bullet flying into their car. I think about neighborhoods and cities not being torn apart by gunfire whizzing across the streets and through windows. I think about teenagers who can't see a way out of their sorrow, having access to mental health care instead of their parents' gun. And when I think about ending gun violence, I think about women in abusive relationships that would have one more day to get out before their partner used a gun to murder them. I think about a world where fewer people die at the hands of police officers because the fear of guns being in the hand of everyone on the street is a distant memory. I imagine Americans going to the movies and concerts and church without glancing towards the exit signs to make an escape plan. I think about bodies remaining whole with no gunshot wounds destroying bone and tissue. I imagine myself picking up my son without struggling because both of my hands are perfect, neither one familiar with the devastation of a bullet. Um, yeah, I love that. I think about this section a lot right now, um, because we're kind of living in a time where I think we're being intimately acquainted with how our belief systems and how our choices affect other people,
Yeah.
people that we don't even know, like on a very grand scale that I
Yes.
think we haven't, at least in my lifetime, haven't had to deal with or
Yeah.
comprehend. Um, and it can be really scary and disorienting to think about something like that
Yeah.
and feel like, oh, maybe what I believe is wrong, or maybe what I'm shifting in that. And it feels so uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And it can be really scary
Yeah.
because those things are so ingrained in us.
Yes.
Um, and for me, gun violence was one of those things,
Yeah.
even after it happened to me. Um, and so I think it's important to say, you know what, I think I still believe a lot of the same things, but I think how I was living those out or how I thought they would work
Hmm.
um, in a political system or in a community, I think maybe that's different. Um, and it's okay to explore that and to figure it out. And especially with gun reform, because I think people hear those words and often think, okay, the goal is just laws, the goal is just to take guns away, et cetera, whatever you want to interpret that as. But the foundation, it's about people thriving in life and being able
Yeah.
to live their lives whole without the constant threat of
Yeah.
violence and suffering and death.
Yeah.
Um,
I
the
mean,
guns,
it's pro-life.
it's
It's
pro-life
yeah.
all the way around.
Yeah.
The guns is almost a secondary issue,
Hmm.
like to me. If there was a way to end gun violence and not worry about the guns, I would do that. But
Yeah.
I don't know that is the case. But yeah, I think that this is a topic that's on my mind a lot
Hmm.
right now, and I think about that passage in the book sometimes when I'm trying to
Yeah.
process all this.
Absolutely. I think, I completely agree that we've been called over the last year and a half to consider, community care beyond just ourselves, right? Like,
Yeah,
what does it look like to not just look at what we want in our moment and our insular family in our lives, but like, what does it look like to consider how our actions and our policies affect everyone around
yeah,
us? And so, and I think gun violence is again one of those things that people really struggle to think through if it's not actively affecting them in that
yeah,
moment.
yeah, for sure, for sure. I've had a lot of people tell me, I don't know anyone that has been impacted by gun violence. I don't know anyone that survived a shooting. I didn't know all of
Mm-hmm.
these things because it's so easy to see it
Mm-hmm.
on the news, scrolling through Twitter. You think about it for a little while, maybe a
Yeah,
couple of days, and then you get to move on with your life. And no one's like begrudging you that you get to do that.
yeah,
I even say a couple times in the book, like, I don't want more people to have experienced this.
exactly. Yeah,
That's the last thing I want, but
yeah.
we have to figure out how to make it accessible for
Mm-hmm.
people to hear stories and kind of understand
Yeah,
what other people are going through so that we can do something about it
yeah,
before more people have to experience it to kind of come to that realization.
yeah.
Um, that's how change happens. We can't wait for every person to experience every terrible thing to do something about it. We would
Right,
never get anything
right.
done.
Right. I mean, and that's a part of empathy is
Yeah.
being able to consider how things affect other people, even if we haven't experienced it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And we're not so good at making choices for other people. Um, we're not so good at saying, well, this might not impact me, but it's probably going to impact somebody else. So maybe I should make my choice based on them and not myself. That's really hard. And,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not so great at it. I hope I'm getting better at it. But yeah, I think um, we've definitely been living in an individualistic
Yeah.
culture, an individualistic mindset.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's hard to make like community oriented choices.
It is apparently very hard for us. I don't think I realized how hard it would be for all of us
No, no, I
until
mean,
this year. Wow, it's really hard. And I think I really appreciated that in your book, you're coming from a Christian background, a Christian perspective. And, I just appreciated you talking about like, man, I mean, the Jesus I'm reading in the Bible is really community oriented. Like
yeah,
the message is real clear that we're supposed to care for everybody else at the
yeah,
same level as ourselves. And
yeah.
like, how are Christians getting this so wrong? What's going on?
I know. I think, I kind of realized like um, for a long time, I think I knew like American Jesus
Yeah.
very well.
Yes.
Um, kind of how to fit the teachings of Jesus into the
Yeah.
culture we already live in,
Yes. Hmm.
versus
Yeah.
like fitting our culture and the way we live into
Yes.
the teachings of Jesus.
Yeah.
Because those are very different, and like anybody, you can make Jesus fit however you want to. You can
Yeah.
pick and choose
Yes.
and go on and feel totally confident in that and your choices. Um, for me, I just, my life changed so much. And I think that helped me
Hmm.
reorient the way I looked at God because
Yeah.
suddenly those things didn't fit for me. I made all the right choices, I did
Hmm.
all the right things, and something really bad still happened to me.
Yeah.
And I prayed for healing. I worked really hard for it, and it didn't come.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. I really thought, if I prayed really hard and I
Uh-huh.
did the right things, like I would be one of those stories, those miracles. And
Yeah.
like my life is a miracle, and the things that have happened to me are miracles. Those just
Hmm.
don't look like
Hmm.
this Jesus I knew. And suddenly I had to really get to know that Jesus that's near to the brokenhearted
Hmm.
and with the people on the margins, with the
Hmm.
people that are suffering, the people who are experiencing injustice. You know, that was a very different Jesus than the one I knew. And I like that one better.
Hmm.
And that means that I get to make choices that help other people experience that Jesus
Yeah.
that loves them and cares for them
Yeah.
in a world that doesn't so much act that way towards them. And it reoriented the way I look at almost everything in life.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful for that. It makes me feel closer to my neighbors and people
Yeah.
who don't share my same experiences.
Yeah.
But
Gives you
that's
more
a really hard
compassion.
shift. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it totally opened my eyes to a posture of humility and just learning from other people and saying, oh, wow, like a lot of stuff I believed in, I don't think is right. And,
Hmm.
um, who can I learn from? What can I do?
Hmm.
Um, yeah. And I don't wish for people to have experienced what I have. But I do wish that opportunity for learning
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
change and transformation for people.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Absolutely. I was really moved in when you talked about shifting your faith from, that faith that says like if I do all the right things and I pray that God will answer those prayers, and it's kind of like that order up Jesus, right? But many of
Yeah.
us were raised that way.
Yeah.
And just my life experiences are very different than yours. um and I obviously have not survived a shooting, but I have definitely been in the position of praying desperately for something
Yeah.
that did not manifest,
Yeah.
and praying for things that felt desperate
Yeah.
about, and just watching God go, nope, that's not happening.
Yeah.
And and then finding a more mature faith
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. We both have the experience of being raised Christian, being raised
Hmm.
by parents who own guns.
Hmm.
Feeling kind of, I grew up just thinking like that was just normal, you just have a gun in your house to protect
Yeah.
yourself. And then, obviously this experience slowly shifted for you. Do you think that you might have changed though, even if this hadn't happened? Do you think you were on a trajectory of social justice? You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely do.
Yeah.
Just kind of the course of my life and, moving to a new area that was different
Hmm.
from where I grew up and meeting new people and being exposed to people who have lived differently than I do.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I definitely think that I would have gotten there without this experience, especially because um, my opinions and my beliefs did not change immediately. There was
Hmm.
still like a couple of years after the
Yeah.
shooting where I I kind of felt like, oh, I don't know, like this doesn't feel so right anymore, but it wasn't automatic and it,
Hmm.
definitely wasn't like a 180.
Yeah.
It took a long time for me to think, okay, maybe there's a different way of seeing this in the world. Um,
And I thought you were really gracious in your book too, of just even still including though people who do still own guns, people who, of just like this isn't a black or white, right? Like this
yeah,
isn't like you have to be completely against guns, you don't ever own a gun, you don't want nobody to have guns, versus like no, we can include people who own guns, but like let's be on the same page with like some people shouldn't, and it
yeah,
should be reduced, and the types of guns should be monitored.
yeah,
I appreciated
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I definitely, understand people who kind of can't do that, people who are very black and white about it. I understand that perspective. But for me, I don't think it's helpful, especially because of the people that I know.
Mm-hmm.
I do know people who represent any standard for a responsible gun owner that I would list,
Mm-hmm.
they fulfill those. And that's really what's important to me is kind of having these standards because we
Yeah.
kind of throw around that term responsible gun owner. Well, that could mean anything to anyone. And without kind of these things like, storing the gun safely, keeping the
Mm-hmm.
ammo somewhere, keeping it in a place where a child couldn't get it or someone who is having a crisis couldn't get it, making sure you don't leave it in your unlocked car, just like these lists of things. Like I
Yeah.
know people that represent those things and care very deeply about making sure people are
Mm-hmm.
safe. And that's why they have a gun, because for them, that's what they believe, would be something that they could use to help people safe. I may not share that same
Mm-hmm.
opinion or position, but I know that those people are still good people.
Mm-hmm.
We just look at it differently than I do. And we need those people to
Mm-hmm.
make any headway on
Right.
this issue.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's especially important because, we could really pass all the laws we want to, if we had a majority and we got laws through Congress. But if we don't have a culture that is shifting along with the laws,
Mm-hmm.
um, then what does that really mean? Like, if we
Mm-hmm.
don't have people that really desire to keep
Yeah.
people safe and to reduce gun violence, like, I mean, laws are great, but without that, I don't know if that's gonna
Yeah.
have the achieve the goal that we think it will.
Yeah.
I would much rather see a people who is committed to
Yes.
doing that even
Yeah.
without the laws. And
Yeah.
so that's why I think it's really important that we don't just totally discount one group.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. Like you use that example in the book of Sarah Palin just basically saying like ammo is expensive and so don't send a warning shot, basically
yeah,
like shoot to kill almost.
yeah,
And I do agree with you that it's those kinds of attitudes that really need to shift in addition to policy, right? That
yeah,
this whole attitude of just like come at me, if you're dating my daughter, here's my gun. Like we're just so casual in this country around gun violence. Like it's a joke or a meme or something. It's really disturbing.
yeah. And just like the value of life in
Yeah.
general.
Yes.
The things that we believe are justification for killing someone. We
Yeah.
see this with police shootings or,
Uh-huh.
self-defensive gun use. I
Yeah.
think in the book, I tell a story about the time at our local Walmart, a guy was in the parking lot and saw people stealing some stuff
Hmm.
coming out of Walmart, and he fired the gun
Right.
in the parking lot in the middle of the day
Yeah.
because people were stealing like a few $100s worth of things
Right.
from a, you know, global store.
Yeah.
Like this person decided that maybe injuring or killing them or someone in the parking lot was worth a few $100s.
Right. Right.
Like, that's a what are we doing? Like you hear
I
stories like
know.
that and it's like, okay, we seriously undervalue like life, what is or is not a death sentence in our
Yes.
country. And laws could prevent something like that, but they're not
Mhm.
going to change like the heart behind it.
Yeah.
A lot of people will say like, well, don't you believe there's just evil in the world? Just people make bad decisions. Of course I do.
Yeah.
Of
That doesn't
course.
mean they should be killed.
Yes.
Yeah.
So like that doesn't mean we make it easier for people to
Uh-huh.
make those choices. Like
Right.
that's why we need both laws and,
Yeah.
a total cultural change in the way we look at people
Yeah.
and people we don't know very well, our neighbors, people that live near us. Like it's just so easy to think, well, I don't know them. I don't have to consider their life before I make this choice.
Right.
Um, yeah, and that's a problem.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was also so disturbed when you talked about just how low those rates are of when someone is convicted of a violent crime, whether domestic violence or something like that, just how low the rates are of asking those people who've been convicted to relinquish their weapons. Like, we're really
Yeah.
not doing well on that at all. And, I'm a therapist, and I
Yeah.
feel like there ought to be some connection between mental health workers and law enforcement so that we could flag someone and say, like, maybe this person should not have a gun, but we really don't have systems in place at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people just think, oh, it'd be so impossible, it'd be so hard to figure out what to do.
Hmm.
Well, sure, but we figure out difficult things all the time,
We
you
do.
know? Like
Yeah.
we always figure out how to handle, well, we try to figure out how to handle, national crises
Yeah.
and put programs and systems in place.
Right.
And yeah, it might take a while and it might be hard and it's probably going to take a lot of money,
Hmm.
but this is a problem. And like if we really wanted to do it, we could definitely do it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where like these gaps in our systems really show, like what you were talking about, people who are, that's what we call the boyfriend loophole, is
Yeah.
where people who are convicted of domestic assault often aren't able to buy guns. In some states, they do have to turn back in their guns, but that domestic charge only applies to people who are married, who were married in the past, or who live together. It
Yeah.
doesn't apply to people who are just in a dating relationship.
Yeah.
And so those people are often convicted of misdemeanor simple assault, and they don't have to go through that same. So they are able to go buy more guns. They don't have to turn in their guns to anyone. Um, and our laws in place in many cases do work, but we do have these gaps there.
Yeah.
And so all we have to do is fix those little things because, people will say, well, we just need to enforce the laws we have. Well, sure. But if we know that there's a shortcoming with this law, shouldn't we do everything we can to fix it? I think
Right.
just this year, our national background check system passed like 4 million gun sales that were stopped to people who shouldn't buy guns. That's a lot of guns. That's a lot of people who weren't able to buy guns.
Hmm.
So that system does work. We should give it
Absolutely.
every chance, every possible thing it needs to work even more effectively than it does
Yeah.
now. It doesn't have to just be, oh, let's pass, sweeping gun legislation. No, it
Right.
can just be, oh, okay, we know this is an issue. Let's
Hmm.
deal with that issue.
Hmm.
Um, and we can do those things.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
appreciated in your book, you do spend a lot of time just offering kind of practical solutions and then also kind of advising us on how we can talk to the people in our lives in a way that gets heard.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of times we're so afraid to enter into conversations about hard things. Um, because we know we don't have all the answers or we
Hmm.
won't be able to come up with a good answer,
Yeah.
and it'll feel like a failure. And, the other person will be like, oh, I knew it was a scam. They couldn't even answer my questions. Like,
Hmm.
you just feel like a complete failure. I've totally had these conversations.
Hmm.
Um, and so, if I in any way can say, here's a question you might be asked, and here's a
Yeah.
great answer for that question, and here's a great starting point, if
Yeah.
that can help someone feel more comfortable um, to have those conversations, then I will gladly do that.
Yeah.
Because there are so many times like I can know a ton of stuff, and somebody will ask me a question, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I don't have anything to say. And you're thinking, like, well, solving gun violence hinged on this one conversation with my uncle at Thanksgiving, and I've totally ruined it. Like, you feel all this pressure, and it's just a conversation. It's You can just say, I don't know everything, but I think this is a problem, and I'm trying to learn more about it.
Yeah.
um Even things, that's why a lot of places now will hand out little cards, or they'll have posters with scripts about how to ask, like, if your child is going over to someone's house, how to
Hmm.
ask that
Yeah.
those parents if they have a gun in the house. These are
Yeah.
things that people want to do, but it kind of feels awkward and they don't
Yeah.
really know what to say. And so, like, if a simple little script to send in a text message will
Yeah.
help reduce instances of these unintentional shootings, then we can totally do that.
Absolutely.
um yeah.
Yeah. I think your book is wonderful for people who want to learn how to have those conversations. I also think your book is a great gift for the person you want to have those conversations with, right? Like,
Yeah.
to me, I'm already thinking of who I'm giving this to for Christmas.
Thank you.
you know.
Yeah.
Um but I really appreciate you chatting with me. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, so I'm Taylor Schumann Writes on Instagram, and Taylor S. Schumann on Twitter. And then you can go to my website, taylorschumann.com, and everything is there. And yeah, I'm around on all those places, probably mostly
Awesome.
on
And
Twitter.
I'll have a
So
link to the book
yeah,
right under our conversation.
awesome. That sounds
Taylor,
great.
thank
Thank
you
you for
so much. I
having me.
really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. This was so great. Happy to talk to you.